Oh hey, this is Matt Fecher from AudioKit. Let's get started.
What is up, App Music Nation? Today I have an interview with...
We have an amazing show for you today. We have Michael Tyson, the godfather of iOS music, live and in person. Well, in Australia.
Hi, everyone.
Michael Tyson is arguably the godfather of iOS music. He gave the community a voice with the Audiobus Forum, which is now the central community for all things iOS music.
To take it up a notch, I have this new iPad app. It's called SampleBot, where you can make a sound, record it, and then make a beat with it.
But most importantly, he invented Audiobus, which allows apps to talk to each other and share sounds.
Oh, we have fun.
You've had everyone from Billy Joel to Robert Plant use your apps. How does it even feel to see musical icons using your apps and making music with something that you created?
It's one of those things that is so bizarre, it's kind of hard to anchor it to reality. It's like, this is not real. And the first time it happened with Billy Joel, it was ridiculous. I didn't know what to think about it or what to expect from it. It's the most surreal thing imaginable.
I'll start off first. Ready? Okay. So I go.
And very pleasing. It's great to see. It's so much fun to watch other people use my apps, but when it's a celebrity that it's unreal. It's amazing.
That is unreal and amazing. And how did that come about?
Actually, the lead music engineer on the show has been a Loopy user for years. And it was Jimmy that came up with the idea for, he didn't know it was live looping, but he's wanted to sing and layer their voices. And yeah, John at the show proffered a few solutions. They tried hardware pedals and nothing really worked out for a on stage kind of a deal. And then John remembered Loopy and they tried it out and it was perfect. And that was history. So it was kind of right place, right time, really.
So did you see an increase in sales when people use it on TV? Probably not, right?
That's one way of putting it. It had about, I think I calculated at the time, because I ended up going on Australian television too, because it got picked up here. I think it was an 8,000-fold increase in sales over the baseline. It was huge. It was like nothing I've ever seen. And Loopy was at the top of the App Store for a few days, so that kind of gives you an idea. Finally beat Minecraft, yeah.
So you were the top app overall?
Yeah, overall, yeah. Yeah, overall, it was huge.
That is amazing. Were you picking out new cars, new houses?
Well, actually, I reckon it might have been a couple of weeks before I'd done some running the numbers on getting a mortgage and working out what we could afford. And a couple of days later, I'm like, right, that's done. We don't need one of those. It was insane.
Well, it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It feels like it was a complete fluke, and I wish it could happen to everyone.
So was that a one-time thing, or was it a continual?
It was ongoing, actually, and still kind of is. So yeah, so they did, I want to say 4 or 5 Loopy segments with a number of musicians, all of which were great, none of which quite had the same impact as Billy Joel at the beginning, but they were still wonderful. And then, actually, this is the origin of my new app, SampleBot. I got an email from them last year saying, we've got this thing we want to do, not sure if there's anything out there that does it, but we've heard that you're working on something new. And it turned out to be something that I've already implemented in Loopy Pro, which I swear I'll finish it one day. But yeah, I dropped everything and I built SampleBot basically just by taking Loopy Pro's code base and extracting out the bits that they needed for the show and released SampleBot, the app. And so SampleBot's been on the show 3 times so far.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's an interesting origin story. I bet most people don't know that SampleBot was created because of The Tonight Show.
Is TV as effective as it once was for promoting things like iOS apps?
It didn't quite have the effect, but I sent a pitch to them a couple of weeks ago with some ideas for what I think would be really cool. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed for the future.
A lot of our audience is developers, so let's talk about the amazing audio engine, TAAE.
The thing about the amazing audio engine is it forces you to write real-time code right from the beginning. So I'd always thought that in the future I would make something a bit like AudioKit that was more modular and that didn't force you to address the real-time thread so much. So I'm really glad that AudioKit exists. I think it's the one that everyone should be using.
When Michael first emailed me out of the blue, because I never really had the guts to talk to him. I always thought he was much this grand figure in the sky, so I never really reached out. And yeah, and it is weird now that I know you. It was the wrong perception, but you're so nice in person. But really, all the work you've done was so magnificent that I was like, well, this guy calls this thing the great that, and this the great this, and your MIDI stuff was like the Marvel's MIDI engine or something. It's like, this guy, everything he does is great. I can't touch that. But then he was so nice, and I was desperately afraid that he was emailing me to just say there's something wrong with AudioKit, and when he was actually writing back to say that it passed a test in his blog, I was like,
your work is so much better than the amazing audio engine ever was. It was something that, I look back now, I think it seems to be a developer trope where code that you've written anything earlier than about a year ago, you look at it and you go, what was I thinking? I feel that way about the amazing audio engine 1. It makes me cringe. So I'm so glad that AudioKit exists.
When you were creating Audiobus, did you think it was even possible? I mean, what would happen if you went through all this trouble and it didn't work? You're doing something that had never been done. You could have just wasted a year of your life. What was your motivation for solving this impossible problem, and how did you keep on?
Good question. The idea actually came from Loopy's user community. I would get a lot of emails from people saying, hey, I've got this great guitar amp simulator app and I want to be able to loop it, but whenever I record in Loopy, I'm just getting the clean signal. And for a long time I was just writing back saying, yeah, that's not possible. But I don't know, it started to occur to me that actually would be really cool, and why isn't it possible? So I started playing around, and it's really just a matter of, I think when it comes to solving problems in code, in programming, it's much like any other creative endeavor. You just plug away until it's solved, or you die, or you give up. But yeah, I mean, there were dead ends along the way, and I just kept trying things. I guess the main difficulty on iOS is because it's so locked down, more so now than ever. It provides certain challenges if you want to do something that's outside the box, because there is no outside the box anymore. So when I began, I actually used MIDI. I was bringing all the audio over into SysX and sending it over a MIDI port. And it worked great, because it was built on, at the time, it still is, built on Mach ports, which is a really low level, really efficient communication infrastructure that's on macOS, it's on iOS, it's everywhere. And eventually I stripped out the MIDI stuff and I just used Mac ports directly. But when iOS, I want to say 7 came along, there was a big security push and they shut down Mach ports, which means Audiobus is dead, basically. So we got invited to WWDC at the time, and they sort of said, this is what's happening. We've left a back door open for you for this version, but in the future it'll be gone. But that's a whole other story. In terms of solving stuff though, yeah, it's just patience and a certain amount of continuing to search even after you think you've solved the problem. Because there's often an issue of, yeah, that's the solution. And then if you leave it and you don't think about it again, often you'll come back and you'll regret it. So I do a lot of rechecking and making sure that I come back after a while to look at code that I've written and make sure that it's actually the way it should be, because your brain changes over time. And I discovered a few things along the way by doing that.
So Apple was aware of what you were doing. At any time, was it still in the back of your mind? Like, what if they pull the plug on this? What if they say, that's not a good idea after all. Sorry, better luck next time.
Yeah, we had a really tense, about a month, I think, as we were finished with release, this is my business partner Sebastian and I, and we submitted it to Apple. This is the Audiobus app itself, and it got through review, no problem. It was fine. So we're like, wow, we're home free. And then when we were actually ready to launch, so we found a whole lot of launch partners, about probably maybe a dozen or so apps. And they were ready to go. We submitted Audiobus again, the final build, and it didn't make it through review. It got flagged. And so we're thinking, oh no, all this work. And it had been, I don't know, a year more of development time. And this is one of the things with app review. It's kind of a black box, you know, and there's no recourse. If they decide to shut it down, you're done. So we ended up getting in contact with our contact at Apple, the sort of developer liaison for audio, and had a bit of back and forth. And he managed to push it through, got it through for us, and it's been fine ever since. But I tell you what, it almost crashed and burned right at the end there.
Oh wow, that must have been so nerve-wracking. I can just imagine you just sweating bullets.
I think that's something that I've probably learned along the way, which is to be a bit less ambitious with pushing the technology on iOS, just because the risks are huge. I mean, I did all the work myself, and I continue to do so these days. But can you imagine if you paid a team of developers to do that, you could be out hundreds of thousands of dollars and then be shut down right at the end without knowing, because you can't get pre-approval for stuff. That's one of the things that I think could be really useful for developers. If there was some kind of I'm going to lay out my project plan, it's going to do these things, can we get pre-approval? I think that would make it a lot less scary.
Is it clear which one has been more financially prosperous for you all?
Yeah, Loopy has been the better seller. Just because it's more of a mass appeal. You know, you can not know much about music and have a lot of fun with Loopy, whereas the music community, amazing as it is small. That's one of the things that I like about it. It's really nice to be able to target a fairly small niche, because you can get to know the people, and rather than just having a mass appeal kind of deal. But Loopy's always been the better seller.
Loopy is an audio app too, though. It's still mostly will appeal to musicians. So I would think the community, while maybe larger because it can be fun for non-musicians, still targets people who are interested in doing something musical with their iPad or iPhone.
Yeah. Loopy is able to kind of straddle both of those arenas somewhat, whereas Audiobus is. When people ask what I do and I say I'm an app developer and they say, oh, what apps have you made? It's Loopy that I talk about, because Audiobus, it's a bit like trying to explain your PhD thesis. You know, unless these are people who know music and have worked with music tech, it's quite difficult to explain what it does and why it's good. So I think that's probably the main reason. I mean, both are great, but Loopy just seems to be the one that, you know, every man and his dog can enjoy. And I routinely meet people in the street and who know Loopy.
Do you meet them on the street and have Loopy come up in random conversation with strangers?
That's a good question. People are really interested in app developers. I think because it's one of those jobs that it has a lot of mystique, and, well, I guess it's a bit like it's a joke to say it now, but like a gold rush. It certainly was at the time. And everyone wants to make an app. So when you say you're an app developer, people want to know what you've done. So I guess that's how it gets across. And everyone wants to be taught how to make one, and want to share their idea.
Okay, so we have a question that we ask all our guests, and you're a good one. What tips do you have for people that want to get started making audio apps?
Run screaming. I guess I have a couple of angles from that. The most pragmatic is, in terms of financial reward, manage your expectations carefully, because it's not the gold mine it once was. It's very, very hard to make money on the App Store, and you've got to be good at everything. You've got to be a great graphical designer, you've got to be able to do marketing and social media, and you've got to be able to, you've got to have so many skills to make it a success. And even then, if you've got all of those things, it might not happen. So approach with caution. Don't make any massive investments. That's the boring stuff. The fun stuff, learn C. Don't hold locks on the audio thread. In fact, don't interact with the audio thread at all. Stay way clear of the audio thread, people. Just don't do it.
You actually had a really popular blog post about that, right?
Yeah, I had a bit of a rant. I handle a lot of support requests, like I said before, from users who think it's Audiobus's problem, but it's actually other apps. And so I'm constantly coming across glitchy apps and things. So I think I must have just hit my critical threshold one day and decided to go on a rant.
So of all the things you've made, what are you most proud of?
Audiobus. I think it's Audiobus. It was the most technically challenging and rewarding thing to make, just because of the crazy stuff that was involved. But yeah, I love that it seems to have had this effect on people's ability to make music and be creative on the platform, and the follow-on effect with the Audiobus Forum has been fantastic.
Yeah, everyone gravitated to that central location. What drew everyone to the Audiobus Forum?
I don't know. I mean, I often wonder if it's just because Audiobus is what it is. Like, it's an app that brings other apps together. And so the flip side of this is, of course, I'm always getting support requests for other app developers. This app doesn't work. Yeah, I need to contact the developer about that one. But it seems like probably a natural place to go. But it's one of those things with communities. It's almost magical how they form. I certainly couldn't reproduce it.
They say communities are a reflection of the founder. So you're a good guy, so it created a great forum of people.
Thank you very much. I'll take that.
For those watching at home, we asked the people on the Audiobus Forum to submit many of these questions. There's probably 10 pages of questions. So a lot of these questions are from actual users. I'm just passing them along to Michael. These are really great questions, and I wish I could take credit for them, but they're from the community. As a pioneer of iOS music, you have some unique insight. Where do you think iOS music is going to be 2 years from now?
Not behind the scenes as you'd think. I'm in the dark, as everyone is, about Apple's plans. To be honest, look, 2 years, not much changes in 2 years. I don't think we'll see massive changes. If you'd said 5 years, I wouldn't have been able to answer the question, because who knows what happens then. I've been in sort of doing a bit of, forward-looking financial planning and stuff, and trying to figure out, given Audiobus and Loopy and my company, what to expect. And looking beyond 5 years, there's absolutely, it could be anything. I mean, the App Store has only existed for 10 years, right? So it could be anything at all. And in our society, we're at this, the beginning of the hockey stick, right, with technology development. And we could be seeing anything in 10 years, let alone 5. But in the short term, I think, well, look, auto unit extensions on iOS, that's definitely the future. It's a wonderful architecture, and I'm thrilled that Apple built it. I think we're going to see much more use of that. We've had the MIDI stuff come in iOS 11, being able to generate MIDI from audio units. That's a huge step forward, and I think we'll probably keep seeing evolution. Maybe some cross-platform stuff with the Mac. Who knows?
If you could have iOS music development go anywhere in the next 2 years, where would you like it to go?
Oh, stability. Stability. Really, I would be quite happy if everything were frozen as far as features go right now and just worked for all the bugs. It would seem that that's what's happening with iOS 12, at least. It looks like things are headed in the right direction there. We've struggled since, I want to say iOS 7 and 8, really struggled with various glitches and things in the underlying frameworks on iOS. And just an example, this is why I believe audio units are so great. I've got a code module in Audiobus, which is responsible for loading an audio unit or an app. And the code, like it's about, say that much is for loading an inter-app audio node, and that much is for loading an audio unit, because all of this is working around all the bugs in the system right now. So I think just looking at Audiobus, I think I've probably invested maybe 30 or 40% of the total time in working around issues that we discovered in the system. So it's a huge cost when it's not quite working right. And anyone who went through the iOS 10 transition with the glitches will share my frustration there. So yeah, I just want to see an improvement in quality, and it will be fantastic.
drop the rhythm, everything is secure. Come on, I'll let your lust overpower.
Was Loopy inspired by something you wanted to do musically? That's why I thought maybe you'd have more of an answer. You answered it from the perspective of a programmer wanting stability, but is there a musician side of you that still would like to see something else? So kind of a two-part question, where you started, where you're going.
Yeah, it's funny you should ask, because I always had an aspiration. I mean, the reason I made Loopy was because I wanted a live looper, just because I'd seen some amazing performances, and I grew up playing jazz trombone, actually. I haven't touched it for, 15, 20 years now. But I play a bit of guitar as well. But you know what? I don't really make music. If I have a spare moment, I'm making tools, I'm programming. So I'm not too proud of that. Like, I wish that I was making more music, and therefore would have a bit more, I guess, authority in this field, because I often don't use the tools very much. I'm all about making them.
Well, that brings up a good question. What if someone were to give you $1 million a year and say you can work on whatever you want, and they take over all your existing responsibilities and say, hey, we've got everything covered, just build whatever you want to build. No worries about money or time. What would you do? What would you build?
I'd work on Loopy Pro. Make more stuff. Yeah, look, Loopy Pro is all I want to do. I wake up in the morning, I want to work on Loopy Pro. I can't, because I've got other responsibilities, like getting Audiobus to a point where I'm happy for it to be left for a while. And yeah, that's what I'd do. I'd finish it off. I can't wait to get it done. And yeah, I mean, in terms of, I guess the question implies there could be something else in my life, but you know what? There's not. Making stuff was my hobby. It was what I was doing when I should have been doing other stuff. And then I turned it into a career, and now I have no hobbies.
Well, that's amazing that you're already doing what you love and would continue building Loopy.
I know, it's unbelievable. What an amazing thing to be able to say. It's such a blessing.
Of course, if anyone wants to give us $1 million, I'll certainly take it.
I've said this before, and I guess I'm learning from Donald Trump to just repeat yourself, but like, had someone asked you that before you did Loopy and did Audiobus, you may have been driven to choose something completely different, and you might have ended up in a place where you're not saying that you're happy where you're at, because the making of the tools is what like got you into a community of people you like. You met Sebastian, some of you are like your longtime friends and people you rely on, would never have been part of your life if you didn't create those tools. So like, what would you do with $1 million? Of course, you'd continue creating the tools, because that's what has got you to be happy in your life right now. So
it is, yeah. Money is a funny thing. It's one of those things where if you don't have very much at all, it's tremendously important. It's the only thing that's important. But if you're able to live well, it's, I don't know, at least as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't have that much meaning. It's, it's that hierarchy of needs. if you're well fed, you don't really think about food all the time, and I think it's the same with money. Yeah, I guess the counterfactual to that is that if you're doing a job that you don't enjoy, that you just have to do because otherwise you're not going to have enough money, that's where it comes in. But look, if I wasn't getting it paid, as long as I could actually live and support my family, this is what I'd be doing. So I'm amazingly fortunate to be in that position.
Cool. So were you born an audio programmer? Like, what did you do before this to get to this point?
You could almost say I was. I've been programming since I was 6. Yeah, on an old Apple IIe that my mum would bring home from her school. Green screen, big chunky things like that big, and there were no games, there were no apps. If you wanted to do something, you had to write code, and that's what I was doing. As a friend who got me into it, actually, he started with a ZX Spectrum, and I was very interested in what he was doing, and then we started, playing around. And I've always been building things. It's different then. It's different than to how it is now, though, because it was a genuinely creative endeavor. And something about the tools these days. I looked at some of the, the learn to code apps and things. They're just games. It doesn't seem like the kind of, solve your own problems kind of thing. You're just plugging in stuff into existing bits and pieces.
This is another one of those questions from the forum. It's a long one, so I'm going to read it here. Audiobus 3.1 shows a continued evolution of the app. In what areas would you like to see Apple help improve iOS music making development, and how would this help Audiobus evolve further?
Oh yeah, this ties into the thing I was talking about before. In terms of features, look, I think the feature set that's there is magnificent and it's great, and I can't think of anything that I would like to see that isn't there already. But stability, the glitches, the various problems with inter-app audio hosting, technical stuff that's really boring, but if Apple can up the quality of the underlying stuff, it will make a massive difference to the whole platform.
Amen. For those watching, any problems with any of our apps, they're not our fault. It's all Apple, right?
Blame Apple! Yes! Apple's fault, that's right. The code we write is immaculate. It's perfect, yep. It's all Apple.
Your code shines like the sun.
Crashes and burns.
Exactly. It's
Just a burning ball of gas.
Okay, another question from the forum. How do you switch off? Apart from enjoying fatherhood, what would you like to do away from iOS development?
Switch off. What do you like? I can't switch off. We do day on, day off with the parenting. So if I'm not working, I'm looking after Sage. So there's no weekends anymore. There's no downtime. It's work or it's parenting. I'm not complaining. It's a lovely life.
Okay, a lot of people asked about Loopy Masterpiece, but we've already covered that.
Yeah, that's coming. That's all I want to do.
Okay, this was a popular question. Will we ever see tools such as Sunflower on iOS that will let us record system output without restrictions?
Not a chance. I mean, unless you've got a cable coming out from the thing. No, look, Apple, they're in a funny position where they have to contend with all the copyright holders and things. And just on that score alone, it's going to make it too easy to pirate stuff. I just don't think it's ever going to happen.
Another question from the forum. Do you think music production on iOS has a long-term future? More specifically, 5 years from now?
Yeah, sure. I don't see why not. Their hearts are in the right place with respect to audio. You can just see how hard the core audio team are working on building new tech. So I think the future is pretty bright.
Okay, let's say something crazy happens and Apple says, no more iOS apps. We're going to shut that down. We're not going to let people make them anymore. Would you make apps for, Macintosh, Windows, Android? Would you continue making music apps on other platforms?
It's a good question. I don't know. I think probably the desktop would still be a viable place to do this. I mean, the thing is, people are going to want to make music, whether or not Apple are in on the action. So yeah, I mean, audio has always interested me, and I think they'll continue to do so. So yeah, but I don't know about Android. I'm pretty skittish about that idea. I think it would be Mac or nothing.
Okay, this is kind of a follow-up question from the forum. In the future, maybe 20 years from now, what would you like to be doing? Besides like visiting your kid in college.
This? I don't know. I love what I do. I love making stuff. I mean, presumably it'll be amazingly different technology then. Who knows what we'll be making? Augmented reality something. But I don't know. I'm pretty happy just being creative and using the skills that I've got to make cool stuff. I think I like the idea, this might be a bit pretentious, but I like the idea of doing a project that's socially important, that actually makes a difference to people's lives. And I don't know, I haven't come up with the idea yet, but I like to use my skill set to do something important. Climate change solved!
Another question that people want to know, what are some of your favorite musical inspirations and performers?
It's an interesting question. I don't spend a lot of time listening to music these days, although I've got a few sort of go-tos. Actually, I was listening to, there was a New York Times, I think, article this morning about some well-known musicians were asked to present their favorite piece of like 5-minute classical music. And there was a Ravel piece that was at the beginning. And I swear, just before we did this interview, I was sitting on the couch having a cup of tea, and I almost burst into tears in the finale of that extract. It was incredible. So I'm starting to get a bit more into classical and trying to become a bit more fluent and such. But that aside, I watch live loopers really closely because obviously I'm always looking for ideas with Loopy. DubFX is one huge inspiration, who actually lives just down the road. We're good friends, which is very helpful. But he's a live looper who he goes on tours in Europe and started out on the street, and he does some really interesting stuff with that.
Though, have any of those performers used Loopy? Have you seen them use your apps at all?
Yeah, Ben at DubFX has used Loopy a couple of times. There have been a few that have been interesting. Imogen Heap is one actually who I've always adored, and she in fact was the inspiration for Loopy. There was a particular live set that she did for a radio show that blew my mind, and I'd never seen live looping before. And then she used Loopy after I made it. She just did a little skit with it on one of those things that was replaced by Snapchat, basically.
Wow, so did you get in contact with her and tell her that she was the inspiration, or did she just happen to find Loopy on her own?
I don't know how she found it. I've no idea. I didn't get in contact with her.
Okay, your apps are so popular that celebrities just find them and use them. What can you do? Not a bad position to be in.
Apparently. I don't know how it happens. It's a bit embarrassing sometimes. I tell you what, I could use some marketing tips. I have no idea what I'm doing. It was really interesting launching SampleBot because it's the first time I'd launched a completely new product in years and years and years. And I didn't really know what I was doing, and I wrote press releases and I made demo videos and I put them out there and I emailed the Audiobus newsletter and kind of hoped for the best. And yeah, it was weird. Didn't do very much.
So before you were making audio apps, what are some of the apps you made before? I'm sure you were making like Windows apps or something like that.
Yeah, well, the first app that I made was a Visual Basic app that I did for my high school when I was in year 9. It was an app that tracked achievement awards that teachers could go and enter in, and then it prints them out, and then they can give awards at an award ceremony. That was my first massive kludge. Other things I made an app called Auto Rate, I remember, which was an Apple script utility, which would go through your iTunes library and look at the number of plays and then assign a star rating based on that for complete nerds who have to have their iTunes database all rated. A few bits and pieces. The first iOS app that I did that wasn't Loopy was a travel app, because at the time we'd been living in a motorhome in Europe, and it was something that I wanted for us. And it was called Cartographer, and it was an app that let you create Google My Maps. My Maps is you can put place marks on maps and have collections of places and have notes associated with them and stuff. And then the idea was you'd do that either using the app or using Google My Maps, and then sync it and then go out into Rome and have all your place marks there on your map and be able to see on an offline map where you were and where all the things you wanted to see were. And that was the first time that I took it seriously, that I could maybe be an app developer and make money off it. Because the first time I released Loopy, I didn't know what I was doing at all. It did nothing at the beginning. So yeah, that was one that I made from the back of a motorhome in Sicily, I think we were living at the time. Yeah, that was how it kind of began.
That is an amazing origin story. Making apps, traveling Europe in the back of an RV, living the dream.
Yeah, I swear it was the thing that made it all possible, because before that, there's rent and living in Australia is one of the most expensive places in the world to live. Just food is just prodigiously expensive. And just the act of taking ourselves away from that life and living, it's crazy cheap to live in a motorhome in Europe once you've bought the motorhome. It made it possible for us to sort of sit back and think what we actually want to do with our lives. So it takes the pressure off, so you can just make stuff.
Oh wow, I'm so glad it worked out for you. Before you left on this trip, did you have a day job, or what were you working on?
I was actually in the middle of a PhD, which I'm a little ashamed to say I've still not finished. But I started working on the PhD, and I did a PhD just because I figured, I don't know, maybe I wanted to work at Apple or Google or Facebook, and for the most part, a PhD, it's the bare minimum. You got to have one to go in. Well, so I thought at the time. So I was keeping my options open, and then while I was meant to be working on my thesis, I started Loopy. Just because I'm bored with this. I've been working on this for 3 years. I want to do something interesting. So I started doing Loopy, and then I didn't quite manage to finish the thesis before we left for Europe. And I figured I was going to finish it while we were on the road, and I never did, and I never will.
Good for you. You know, Ari has a PhD, but I'm not sure what he does with it.
Oh, it's even beside his name on the video conferencing thing. Nice.
Yeah, he keeps it on the screen just to remind you that, hey, I've got a doctorate and none of you guys do. It puts us in our place.
Can we call you Dr. Oro? That'd be nice.
Call me whatever you want. My PhD sits in my mom's house doing nothing.
What was the inspiration for the amazing audio engine? You had things going on, you were making money. Why did you decide, I'm going to build this open source tool to help the community? That was very generous of you.
It was actually not that big an investment because it was the audio engine that was in Loopy. And the way that I try to write code, it's like I'm writing a public utility anyway. It's just a better way to keep the good coding practices in place. And so I already had it there, and I thought, well, it's not going to cost me anything really to do it. And I was hoping that maybe there'd be more eyes on, which might improve the quality and push me to improve the quality. And yeah, that was the main reason. It was not necessarily altruistic as much as just hoping to get more eyeballs on it.
That's a good strategy. It keeps your code honest and it forces you to adhere to good practices.
It does, yeah, for sure, in a big way.
What advice do you have for developers who might be dealing with some unfair or bad reviews in the App Store?
Oh, my advice probably a year ago would have been to never check reviews. It's one of those things about my mind. I think it's probably pretty common, but you can have, 100 glowing bits of praise. You can have the most wonderful time, and you see one bad review, and you're like, "That's it, screw it, I'm done. I'm not writing another line of code. I'm going to go and, I don't know, raise cows." I've often thought that, and just for my own mental health, I wouldn't look at the reviews at all. But now that you can actually respond to them, I guess I figured I would have to do it. And I mean, that's it. You respond straight away, and you respond helpfully. You take a big deep breath, and yeah, I've had lots of 1-star reviews from people who really should have just emailed support. You don't want to solve your problem. You just want to rant about okay. But now you can get back and you can say, right, yes, we can fix this for you. Email me here. We'll get it sorted. And I've had lots of people turn around and then change it to a 5-star review. You just got to be available, be engaged. I'm still working on the thick skin though. Every single negative review, I need 100 positive ones to balance that.
So if you're watching, go and give Michael some 5-star reviews. He deserves them. If anyone deserves them,
100 of them. Yeah, please do.
Besides some other people, give Michael some 5-star reviews. Especially now that you know it's all Apple's fault and not his.
Yes, that's right. Blame Apple, it's fine.
Michael, it has been so amazing talking to you. Do you have any final thoughts for everyone?
Trying to think of something constructive and interesting, but all I've got is just gratitude, to be honest. I mean, what the Audiobus Forum means to me is so much. It's an amazing thing to be able to be a part of, and the feedback that I get from people on a daily basis it's so great. There are some people who are far better than I am at coming up with ideas and refining stuff, and especially the community of testers. I put out a call for some testing assistance a while ago, and the response was enormous. It was huge. And some of those guys, they honestly, they should be drawing a salary. There's some amazing talent out there, both from a testing perspective, but also just musicality. And yeah, I think we as audio developers are really blessed to have the community that we have. I think it's rare and special, and yeah, needs to be protected and loved.
Protected and loved indeed. Wow, this was a really great interview. And Michael Tyson is amazing. We'd encourage you to support independent developers like Michael. You can check out the links to his apps in the comments section below, and we'll see you soon. AudioKit is a free and open source project. You can learn more at audiokitpro.com.